Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me for a Sunday night version of Polyterology. Okay, folks. Well, I think we got our audio worked out. Andre, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
It was a
Um,
pleasure.
yeah, and just do you want to tell people what's going on your channel, or has the moment passed?
Uh, well, on my channel, the same thing that's been going on for a long time. A lot of it is the current political situation, which is now, as you both know, is ramping up because we're in an election year.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, I did recently change the name of the channel to, instead of Astrology Alert, I called it Proactive Astrology because it's the way I approach all my counseling, consulting, and it's really the astrology that most motivates me. The predictive side is interesting, but from the perspective of a person using astrology for themselves, especially if they, I mean, people that want to learn astrology, they're really motivated to do that. But I think the more important thing for the average person who's not going to spend a ton of time, crunching numbers is to get at how they can use it, how they can
Yeah.
realize what a planet is and how to deploy it. And it's the logic that planets and signs, they have a range of functioning. And the idea is to, play to the high end, sort of do the opposite of Trump's. Trump's way of living is to corrupt everything, every single planet, do it in the worst possible way. So then that has consequences because, well, you can see, I mean, what he's what
Mm-hmm.
he's facing at the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
this happens to people that say break the law a lot, or if a person is mistreating their own health, or doing anything that means they're using their planets at a lower or very low level as opposed to using them in a better way. That's the definition of proactive. So that's what I changed to, and I'm trying to build that up, and we'll see where it goes. But this year, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be pretty busy with the politics as well because
Yeah, because there's so much. Yeah. Yeah, I think until we hit like 2026, I think there's still gonna be so many issues that people are gonna they're gonna be needing to be calmed down, and they're gonna have questions. They're just gonna wanna know, when is this gonna end? What's gonna happen to us as a country? What's gonna happen to me as a person? And, yeah, proactive astrology, that's a really good thing. That really, really helps people. I know, just so
I
everybody
like the
knows.
name change. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. I noticed it online too. I got a reading with Andre, and he is just so, he's just in another league. I've had a lot of astrological readings in my life, and he's
oh,
just,
thank you.
yeah, heads and shoulders up there.
Thank
So,
you. That's a nice compliment.
yeah, well, I enjoyed the reading. I got a lot out of the reading. It was, one of the best I've ever had. And I mean, I'm an old broad. I've been having astrology readings since I was like 10, so I've had a lot of readings.
I've only had a couple of them, and Colleen, yours was the most in-depth one that I ever got. Most of
Oh,
it
thank
was
you.
very generic. So
Oh,
um,
thank you. Thank you.
I
It's
still
funny.
don't understand 90% of it, but it was a lot more in-depth than what I got before.
Well, here's a shameless plug. That's why you have an astrologer, Sherry. You don't need to know every single thing about
That's
astrology,
right.
you know? Just go like once a year is plenty. Just
That's why I've
go
been trying to get Andre on my channel for about a year now. I was like, I need somebody else to
Well,
explain this to me.
really, the thing though is, it's this very thing that I always wonder when someone says, "Well, I got a good reading," and I think, "Well, I wish I could be able to listen to what the person said." But the whole thing is that, to me, a good reading is you take away something that in some way acts as an action guide, because there are lots of readings you can get where it seems really interesting, but then you totally forget about it. So there's not even a single idea that you would in some way
Yeah.
engage with. Now, of course,
Right.
it's true that if you are really panicked about something and you go see someone who's an intuitive psychic tarot reader and they tell you, no, it's okay, it'll be better. But of course, they could also tell you the opposite.
Yeah,
So
they
there's that
could.
as well, right?
Yeah.
But that could also settle you down. But as I understand it, in a way, it's the way I treat my astrology. People will ask me at times, well, can you do a detailed 12-month thing of the upcoming year? And I think, well, I don't even do that for myself. I don't live like that. So why would I think that that's going to help you?
Yeah.
It's not that helpful. What's helpful is how can you do your chart, in alignment with the cycles that are there. What do you do to make this year really interesting? And some of
Yeah.
that is something you do all the time, right? And some it's particular to the year because it's very different if you're having, say, a lot of Saturn pressure
Right.
in contrast to when you're not. That's a different year, right? But once you know
Yeah.
what it is, join, because if you don't join, it'll be there anyway. So
Yeah.
it's
And by contrast, not only knowing where the Saturn's hitting you, but knowing where Jupiter's hitting you this year.
yes,
That's
right.
also very, very valuable.
Mhm.
I had a reading with an astrologer a couple of years ago when I was first starting my channel, and it was really good. She really focused on perfections and Jupiter. And that's all it took for me to have a pretty good year of setting up, because I was not only setting up my channel, but I had just incorporated my business. And so it was really, she gave me great advice for that. It was but it was not your level advice. Your level advice was really good because I think it hit some things that were not only just, my professional career and stuff, but more spiritual stuff, things to work on that way, and just very, very personal. It was nice. It was all this multi levels. It was really good. Her reading was very good for what I needed at that time because she was really focusing on, I think I had Jupiter coming up in the 9th house, so she was saying, hey, social media, set up all your social media this year. Just get out there, do everything. And I did. And I just, I really did. And that helped. And then of course, the next year, Jupiter would be in my 10th house. So of course I'd get a little reward from that, from all
Right.
that work on the
Yeah.
social media. So it worked out very well.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's
I
yeah,
exactly
still
great
get
advice
lost
because
with the
that's
houses and the.
you don't know the houses, you say?
I get lost with it. It's like, I'll be going along and I'm kind of following what I'm being told, and then somebody will start talking about this and this house and this and that house, and you got Jupiter here, and I'm like, okay, you lost me. I'm out. I don't know what you mean.
Well,
But I think that's just from ignorance because I just don't understand it well enough. Because it always was so intimidating to me that I kind of would like, yeah, I don't need to know that, And then when Colleen did my natal chart for me, what has been about not quite a year ago, I guess,
yeah,
she was able to pinpoint and bring out things that when I sat back and rewatched our video, because we did it on
yeah,
live.
we did it
We did
online
a live stream so people
on
could
my
see
channel.
how painless it was to have that done, And when I went back and re-listened several times now since then,
Good.
it's funny how things. Oh, I remember. Okay, I remember that happened at this time, and this happened at that point. And it was just really enlightening to be able to go back and re-listen and be able to pinpoint events in my life that she had pointed out in the reading that at the time it just didn't register with me. But when I listened to it for the third or fourth time, it was like, oh, wait a minute. That's when this happened, or that's when that happened. And so, yeah, I can see where it can be very helpful in not just understanding past things, but kind of helping you plan future things,
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah.
And what to look out for, or what to focus on, what to steer clear of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I do the same thing because as I'm listening, of course, I'm listening for things I want to hear when I'm getting the reading. And that isn't always what you're going to hear. You should be hearing, what to look out for. And this is, coming here and here's a health thing. You want to have a few road signs along the way for the year that are, times when we should move forward and times where you should contemplate, etc. Right. But I do the same thing. I record them and I go back and I listen to them and it's very helpful. And I forget. And then when it's a few months have gone by, I have a little distance, a little more, I'm a little more objective, and then when I listen to it I can get different things out of it. So I notice in the chat somebody is asking about one of the things that I actually wanted to talk about tonight. I don't know, Andre, if you had a chance to see the email that I sent you with some topics.
did. Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that somebody in the chat wants to look at is the eclipse for April 8th. And I did pull up a chart for that.
Is that the one in Libra or the one in Aries?
Aries. Where's my?
That's the solar eclipse, right?
Yeah, on April 8th. Wait, I had it up. Hang on. Where is it? Is that it? Nope, that's the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction.
I think that's the one that's at 19 plus Aries. And then there's one
Are
that's
you?
at 5 something Libra.
Here we go. Aries solar eclipse. There it is. Okay. Do
Are
you have
you
Andrew?
shooting
You
for a
want,
particular kind of questions that you want me to watch out for, Colleen? Or since I'm
well,
kind of
we're
jumping
gonna,
into this last minute, I want
yeah,
to
I
know what to
know.
look for.
We're going to talk about the eclipse. We might talk a little bit about Uranus conjunct Jupiter, which happens right after the eclipse. And then we're going to talk about a couple of political figures. So they can put
Okay,
in political questions or whatever. So, Andre, do you have that chart or do you want me to share my screen with that chart? Or do
Go
you want
ahead.
to just talk?
It's probably easier if you share it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share. And I'm going to go to this screen. And here we go. Okay, so this is the, I'll just go ahead and do that. Is that better? No, it's the same. Okay, it was big on my screen now. Okay, well, that's ridiculous. So, so we have, yeah, we have the solar eclipse in Aries. You can see everything's all clumped up here. Yeah, it's at 1923 Aries for the sun and the moon. Mercury's also in there at 24 Aries. Venus is dragging behind at 4 degrees Aries. I sound like I'm talking through a horse race, don't I? So I think this is going to be an important eclipse, but what do you think?
Important in what way?
Important because, well, first of all, because it it comes right before the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, and I think that's going to be really important. Just because that doesn't happen all the time, and also because of the confluence of everything in this very small area, except for Pluto. Now, is Pluto going to be? No, Pluto's not really going to be hitting any of those. It's still going to be at like 1 Aquarius, if that. But I just
Yeah.
think this is really interesting with everything really, really concentrated in here. It's at the Aries time of year. It's that time of year where everything is sort of starting. So I think anything that happens at this time of year, people tend to give it a lot of weight, like it's a big portent. And that's and also Mars is conjunct Saturn right there in Pisces, and that's also kind of important. Now, is that going to do anything with these guys? Just maybe a sextile? No, it's too far away. All right, so we don't really have those connections, but I think that it's always important when things are happening around this time of year, and again, it precedes the conjunction with Jupiter Uranus. So
Yeah, I mean the one thing to me when I'm looking at eclipses, I think people really overplay eclipses. First of all, they're always talking about the next eclipse, and they say this and that, and then some things happen. Other times nothing happens.
mhm,
It's the logic to eclipses is where the eclipse is. Depending on if someone has, for example, the sun, they themselves are born on April 8th, so that this eclipse lands on them,
yes,
then they're definitely going to feel it. Or if they are at right angles, like someone that's Capricorn with 19, 20, 18 to 20 Capricorn, you get a
mhm,
square, or Libra, you get another square, or Cancer. So, in my own experience with eclipses, what's strange is that I've had eclipses where they were challenging me like that, something in a square or an opposition, and it felt hard. It felt low energy, difficult. I just didn't feel good. Not so much that something specific happened, just the feeling was really
mhm,
obvious. But then there have been eclipses, the total opposite, where the energy lines up well with my sun sign or even with a planet. And I remember one specific one last year where I was high as a kite, in my feeling, one of those things where things just coincided. So I get up on the day of the eclipse and I'm feeling great and I felt inspired and I felt connected. So this is I think for individual people, tends to be the most important. But in terms of an eclipse, know your planets and see how they line up with the eclipse. But you could say this year, though, as an eclipse at 19 Aries, this is the American fifth sign. So you've got two planets, the sun and moon, and you've got Venus in Aries, and you've got Mercury in Aries. And Mercury directly squares the American Mercury. So you can expect the fifth sign is where you do elections, contests, people get into a thing. So you can expect that probably will mean the election situation is really ramping up, and there might be controversy and arguments, and all of that can get ramped up more than other years, given the year that we're in. As far as the Jupiter Uranus, that follows the next month. One thing about that conjunction, though, it's pretty quick. Like there's no station. If you had either Jupiter or Uranus stationing around that time, or both, then you get a really massive effect from that conjunction. But that conjunction, the Jupiter will move right through pretty quickly. Within 3 days, it's fast, right? Now, I don't know if you noticed, though, that conjunction, I had a talk with an astrologer on my channel, and he thought that because of the relative rarity and his feeling that Uranus is strongly connected to American presidents. He mentioned how George W. Bush has a Uranus connection, Obama,
Oh, yeah.
Clinton, etc. He mentioned that he thought this would be beneficial to Trump. And when he was, because he said, well, Jupiter could be judges cutting him breaks, the authorities giving him a pass. The problem is, and I didn't, I was there that day, and I'm pretty quick to notice, wait a second, hold on, let's look at what's really going on here. But I missed it. And the thing is, that conjunction is precisely 150 degrees from his moon. So that conjunction becomes a very dangerous conjunction, because Jupiter in his chart is connected to the 5th and the 8th. And the 8th is a dangerous house, which you're seeing, by the way, in spades. I mean, this whole thing where he's getting whacked for money because of taxes, because of insurance fraud, all of that is 8th sign. So it's happening before your very eyes. But it's also, the 8th has that, very scary meaning. It's the house of death, the house of Scorpio. It's a very dangerous house. So you put the ruler of that house, with one of the rulers, with Uranus. His Uranus at birth opposes his moon. So his moon rules the 12th. Now, this guy said, well, the moon is his enemies. He surmised that because the moon is where it is, that he defeats his enemies. I'm more likely to look at the moon ruling the 12th being a dangerous planet if you put it under pressure. So you put Jupiter, Uranus, 150 to the moon. And what really puts it in a highlight is that at the same time as that is happening, almost on the same day, Mars is in Pisces squaring his sun from the 8th. All of that is happening simultaneously. So to my mind, that's a dangerous moment for Trump in regard to his health. At minimum, it is not a good moment in a chart when you've got Mars pressure in a square and you've got planets of this magnitude doing a 150. And that 150, by the way, I studied that aspect over the last few years, and I've known about it for decades, but for some reason it took me until the last 5 years to now always spot it when I'm looking at charts, because you see it almost always whenever there's a health issue or worse. You see the aspect, and what you're looking for is the numbers, because as soon as you see the degrees, just look around. Like, for instance, right at this moment, Saturn is transiting at 7 degrees Sagittarius. So, Pisces. So then you look for relevant degrees, which would be 7 in Libra, or, the signs that are 150. And you see this a lot. Now, Trump happens to have a lot of this, not just through there. That's a flyby conjunction, but he has the Neptune-Pluto transiting off and on. They're doing a 150 to his ascendant all year, and to his Mars. That's not good. That's definitely big pause around feeling well, health, and so on. And I think because they were already doing this last year, I don't know if you've noticed, you've been watching this guy, he's had a pretty big decline in
Yeah,
his
yeah,
his way of connecting lately is very different than 8 years ago. He's really losing his mojo, in my to
yeah,
my understanding.
yeah.
And I
I
think
pulled up the transit chart of the conjunction to his chart just so people could see the pile up that he's going to get up here, and the here's this over here. But does this so
no, I think you have Trump Jr. here. This isn't Trump.
I have the wrong one. Sorry. Okay, never mind. Let me get the right one. Thank you. Let me get that right one. So that was the interview with Patrick Watson, right?
Patrick Watson, yeah. No, Patrick
Yeah,
Watson, he's a very good astrologer. It's just
yeah.
that this is one area now. See, it gets interesting. We get into these political things, and I'm starting to hear more and more of this. People say to me, well, this astrologer said this, the astrologer said that. They expect me to reply to everything. And, at some point, I think, maybe time will tell, because I look at Trump's chart. So far, if you say to me, okay, you know what, stop talking, you have to put a whole bunch of money on this, I wouldn't bet on Trump. Bad idea,
No,
because you'd lose
no.
it. In my
Yeah.
opinion, that's how I see it. There are points and counterpoints. Probably the biggest thing is that people focus on Jupiter being in a sign
Hmm.
as the savior. Well, first of all, Jupiter, when you're in a lot of trouble, it can actually accelerate your demise if the surrounding energies are really complicated. The Jupiter can expand the problem, and the tell is that Jupiter goes into Gemini all the way into October, and then it stations, and it
Hmm.
stations directly opposite his moon. An opposition by Jupiter is not helpful at all. That's what
No.
he's moving into the election with in November, because the
Yeah.
last point is the one. And I'm not even mentioning all the other things that are piling up on him in the
Hmm.
transits. Really hard Uranus, Saturn in the summer squaring his moon and his sun, and both the progressions and the arcs are really ominous when you look at them in
Yeah.
terms of where things are going.
Well, it looks like Trump himself is born on an eclipse, right? I mean, the node's right
He
here.
is, yeah, he
Yeah.
is.
So, and that's traditionally the sign of kings and queens being born. And so, when another eclipse comes along, even though it's in an air, oh wait, it's not an air sign; it's in Aries, so it's in a fire sign. So it's gonna sextile this, and it's gonna trine this, but still, it's an eclipse. And for the people who are born under those eclipse energies, that's difficult. Um,
Right, but okay, remember that 19 degrees Aries squares his Venus Saturn, and his Venus Saturn are his
ah,
12th house planets, and
yeah.
Venus is his career planet,
Hmm.
and the ninth is legal, and he's been struggling mightily with legal in part. Now, here's this planet that I've been using since, I would say, the last 5 years. I've used it a lot. More really, I could go back to the beginning of Trump's, when he first entered. I started to study it, and then I realized this thing is really vibrating in his chart because Eris moves really slow. It's parked at 24 degrees and it's stuck there for a decade. It's in this part of its elliptical orbit where
Hmm.
it's moving glacially slow. It'll make up speed later, like in 2060 or something, because it's got a 550-year orbit, but it's moving really slow. So it's parked directly square. And one of the tells is that it made a station in January. And now, when you think of Eris, you think of a warrioress, you think of a woman, right? And look what happens
Yeah,
in January. E. Jean Carroll comes in and boom, 85
yeah,
million dollars.
yeah,
That's
that's
a
right.
classic
That's
Eris
right.
situation, right?
Yeah.
But it's also the ninth, which is legal. So his legal problems will never end. This guy will never get out of a courtroom. He'll be 85, 90
Yeah.
maybe before it changes. And in the meantime, the eclipse you're talking about is happening in the ninth, opposite is Jupiter, square his Venus Saturn. So I would say that's a negative eclipse, as is the previous eclipse, the one at 5 degrees Libra. That is next to it's on his Neptune, which is that T square that he has. So that's another bad one. And when I
Yeah.
looked at the ones for later in the year, they're equally bad. There's one in Pisces and there's one, where's the other one? The other one is in There's one at 25 Pisces, and there's one at where
This
is it?
year?
This year, yeah, in
Okay.
September 18th, almost
25
26
Pisces.
Pisces,
October 2nd is
10 degrees Libra.
10
Right,
degrees Libra.
right.
Yep.
10 degrees Libra squares is Mercury, another bad eclipse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically, every eclipse this year is not good for him. And
Yeah.
this is where you can watch those new moons and full moons, and at minimum, you'll see setbacks, bad information, something going wrong. And especially now that I think he's in a fairly full decline. And this guy, I don't know what you think about this, whether or not you're one of the people that think he's been using uppers for many years. I think he's been banking on uppers for a long time. At
I do
least that's
too.
what the people who work for him say.
Yeah.
And knowing a guy like Trump, if you notice what he's been doing is if you're making horrible errors, Nancy Pelosi, he thinks that that's Nikki Haley. I mean, stuff where you think, come on, Donald, get it together. This is bad, right?
Yeah.
So he
Very bad.
may, as a result of that, increase his intake. If he does that, he's putting himself in danger. So that's an example where you know what happens to people when they're under pressure? They use more substances to keep themselves going. But
Sure.
it's kind of like pilots at war take amphetamines. Well,
Sure.
that's good while you're up, but wait till you come down. When you come down,
Yeah.
bad scene. So when you're approaching 80 years of age, if you treat your body that way, you're asking for trouble. And when I see aspects like this, if I were his astrologer, I'd say, I know you want to be reelected, but you got to pull all the way back or you may not get there. It's not a good thing.
I
It's-
agree. And this Jupiter Uranus impulse, I think, is probably going to push him to do something like that because Jupiter is going to make it bigger. Uranus he wants that big electrical push in his body. He wants that.
yeah,
So, I could see that happening. I wanted to point out to people, you were talking about the king conks, and just wanted to point out that this Sag moon is 150 degrees from
correct.
this stuff. So this is what we're looking at, where it's not straight across the sky, it's just 30 degrees back at that 150-degree mark, and that
Correct.
makes a very, very uncomfortable blend of energies. They are not comfortable there, and that forces the native to try to make it comfortable. They do everything they can to adjust it, or they're just in denial, like it's just not happening. So,
Right. Right.
so
And no kidding with this, it's an aspect of injury and breakdown and
yeah,
health problems. Because
yes,
I can tell you my own life, because especially being involved in sports, the number of times that I had injuries, at times self-caused, but self-caused is like when you see it, here we go again. But the point
mhm,
is, it's that. So, and then the other thing is that if you think, okay, well, it's there, you get 150s throughout your life. They're obviously going to be more dangerous the older you are,
mhm,
obviously, right? Because
yeah,
your body is less able to fight
yeah,
off
yeah.
disease or, wear and tear and so forth.
Yeah,
So,
I have a couple of quincunxes in my chart, and they are hard to deal with. They're very hard to deal with. But you learn how to deal with them or you don't. And that's one of the things through using astrology proactively. If you understand that you have that energy, then clearly that's a lesson that you need to work on in this lifetime. If you ignore it and you just think, oh, I got a bad break, everybody's against me, blah, 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 you're not using your energies and your potential. But if you know that that's there, that's one of the things that astrology can really help you with, is pointing
exactly.
out where you can work on things, where you can learn about, what's going on. I wanted to just say one other thing about the eclipse on April 8th. Is one of the reasons I completely forgot about this when we were talking about it, is that one of the reasons it's important is because it's being seen in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And so where the eclipses can physically be seen, that is usually the portion of the planet that gets impacted the most by that eclipse. Other
Mhm.
than that, it's very hard to just say, oh, the eclipse did this or the eclipse did that. Yes, the energies can be brutal, they can be dramatic, they can force you to make a change you didn't even know you needed to change, and then just all of a sudden your life's changed. But they very often don't happen right on the eclipse. Very
Mhm.
often the eclipse kind of puts a line in the sand, like Andre kept referring back to the degrees of the eclipse, because the degrees are what's really important. So you may find you have a planet that hits that degree before the eclipse, a month before, a week before, or after the eclipse, or after the eclipse passes, you may find other planets that hit those degrees months later, like especially Saturn. And then the impact of the eclipse becomes clear and is activated in your life. So eclipses are a tricky thing to use for predictions, but they are, I think, things that we need to be aware of. And because this one's being seen all across the country, I'm going to a place where I can see it. I'm very excited.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I just today got my eclipse glasses. I'm so excited. Have my little kit. It's fun. All right. So that was the eclipse, and we touched a little bit on Uranus conjunct Jupiter. And now I'm going to take us into politics land. Okay. So I brought up Nikki Haley's chart, and I just figured I'd just cut right to the chase. Let's just see what's going on for her. Maybe I need to make this smaller. Is that too small? Yeah, it's too small. I'll leave it big and I'll move this around a little bit. For the election day, is she going to be standing on the election day? Does this spell defeat? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, one of the things is we don't know her birth time.
No, we don't.
So that does leave a really big question mark. This is what happened with Hillary in 2016. There was no chart and there was a lot of flailing around, and astrologers were using a time that was wrong. And someone who's trying to get a big result like this, the ascendant could totally propel you over, or it could work against you.
Yeah.
But I will say that having Pluto on your sun is quite good, and her Saturn trines too. So the Pluto is at birth, you notice that it's in very early Libra, but really geometrically it's making a grand trine. That's that triangle that you're seeing there. So that Pluto is a very nice, strong planet, changing her life in an important way. And it would be a good one to run on for sure. In fact, it doesn't surprise me that she is the last survivor of that group, right? Because
right.
the chart is quite strong. And from there, the Venus was bothering her because Venus at 5 degrees Pisces, you notice that Saturn has been on that like all last year, and she only was able to take off when the Saturn got beyond those degrees, right? So that's
right.
another pattern that is good. And beyond that, the Jupiter in Sagittarius being in Taurus, the thing about being in Taurus is it's good for Capricorn, but by the time we get into the middle of the year, it'll be in Gemini. So Gemini to Capricorn, not particularly helpful, nothing special. Now, for example, Kamala Harris has Gemini rising. That's good. That's an automatic, even though I saw a person say that because her ascendant is later, the person thought that Jupiter gets to about 20 and the ascendant you see is 24, I believe. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, it is. It's 24. You're 24.
Right. So it's a little short, but even within that range, it's a very positive energy to be under when you're running. So I would consider Kamala a major asset to Biden in this sense, because she becomes part of the ticket and it's super helpful. That's what we don't know about Nikki Haley. What's going on there? I mean, for example, if she were to be Pisces rising and Saturn is landing on it, no, that's not a good one.
Yeah, no, it's not. But I mean, Kamala's got this Jupiter coming right up here. This is the day of the election. But what do you think about her North Node being right on her ascendant? Is that like she's just like Destiny's Child? She just meant to be doing this amazing thing? Or what do you think about that? Or does it just give her a sense of purpose?
I interpret it more that way. The North Node on your ascendant is the psychology, because the South Node is on the other side, on the descendant. The South Node inclines you to make relationships and put the other person first, often at the expense of your own intuition, your own needs. And it turns out when you go the other way and focus on yourself, you'll actually serve people better and make your way to a better place. But odds are pretty good she's figured that out, or she wouldn't be where she is. Although, to a certain extent, if we ever see her grow further in her career, it'll probably be when she lets go of some of her doubts about what she's doing. Because, you know, just like what happened to Trump, Trump is now especially dangerous because when he got in the first time, he listened to people because he didn't know what he was doing. Now, if you let him back in there now, he'll turn it into a, you know, North Korea because he
Yeah.
knows what to do and so forth. So North Node activity is like that. It's the idea that you go there, and what the ascendant is you yourself, right?
Yes.
So it's that logic. So I would say overall, it's positive for her. It also, North Node tends to be a really ambitious type of point, you know, where you put a lot of energy into it. It seizes you. This is one of the things that I like about the meanings in Vedic, the sense of being possessed by the node. It just pulls you in, because you see this with relationships in your chart. Wherever the North Node is, people that have planets there will fascinate you in some way, and they pull you in. And so then, for better or for worse, if they pull you in and they are an asset, that's great. But there'll be the type that pulls you in, and then you think, "Oh my God, why did I?" You know, that was a
Yeah.
bad idea.
Yeah.
It was like one of my unresolved desires or something, and then
Yeah.
this person wasn't good for me.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out to people watching, Kamala Harris is also born on a full moon.
Yes.
Now, people born on full moons very often do really, really well in the public.
Yes.
They just naturally understand the other. So, you know, like they can meet anybody and just sort of kind of tune in and relate to them. I mean, of course, there's exceptions. This is, you know, a broad generality, but the people who are born on eclipses are going to be born either on a full moon or a new moon. And so people that are just born on a plain old full moon, that also gives a certain amount of power to the chart and a certain amount of influence in the person's personality. So I just wanted to point that out. She was one of my personalities of the month when I did this full moon, the Aries full moon.
Yeah.
Sometimes I pick out people and I do their charts for that full moon, and I started picking people that actually were born on the full moon, not just with the moon in that sign, and it's much more interesting to do it that way. So yeah, Nikki. Oh, something else about Nikki Haley's chart I wanted to ask you about. If we can go back to Nikki Haley. Now, although we don't know her time of birth, I think she has a T square, doesn't she, in here with is it Neptune, Saturn, and does she have a T square? No.
Well, it's out of sign, but it counts. Yeah, Saturn, Neptune, and Venus.
Oh, and then she's got this. She's got Mars, Uranus. Is that squaring Mercury? Yeah, that's where it is. So we got the Mercury across from or squaring Mars and Uranus. And then is there another one there? So Saturn. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's out of sign. It's there, but and Venus. Yeah. So what do you think how does that affect her a bit? Because she's had some faux pas in the past. You know, she's controversial. She's got that weird relationship with Trump, and then she doesn't like him. I mean, nobody likes him right now. But that Civil War statement, I thought, gosh, that's weird.
Yeah, well, that came, I believe, when she made that statement. Saturn was closer to Venus. Saturn is famous for a setback, you know, where you learn from it, but you think, oh, geez, like, why did I do that? Or
Yeah.
whatever. But so the T squares, though, that's not a bad thing in the sense that when you have T squares, your chart is more dynamic. There's more ambition. In a way, there's more imbalance, seeking balance. So there are people that are going to get more done, provided they figure out how to manage themselves well. Otherwise, you could also get a person with T squares reporting being in constant flux and never getting out of their depression and things like that. But for her, it's, you know, made a political career, some success. She's been an ambassador. She's been a governor. And the thing about these T squares, though, would be that if you trigger them, then they're more significant. Right now, I suppose that eclipse is going to trigger the Aries Libra to some extent, although they're a bit, 16 degrees, that could work. 16,
That's close.
18,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
they're
close.
being triggered. So that would likely be a an important eclipse for her because
Mhm.
that is being triggered. But overall, though, the key is that she doesn't have, for instance, if she had Saturn in there, that would be much harder, at
Yeah.
this point in her. But when
Yeah.
instead, what's happening is Jupiter is trining the Mercury, for example, going
Right.
into a trine. So that's usually much better. It helps to resolve the tension of the eclipse.
Yeah.
So she's very useful, though, I think. I mean, the thing with politics is that it could turn out that what you thought was a good idea turns out to be a bad idea. But I have this sense that she's good in terms of damaging Trump because if she keeps
Mhm.
this up, she's hurting him because the contrast is pretty obvious. She's pretty lively and focused and communicative, and he's not. He's just
Yeah.
even more of a dodo bird than he used to be. It's incredible.
Yeah. And they had her on Saturday Night Live last night.
Yeah, I know. I
Incredible.
saw
I
that.
was like, "Whoa, she's not even the candidate," and they're just like, "Yeah, let's have Nikki Haley." So she's very game. It's like when Bill Clinton played the saxophone on Saturday Night Live, I think. It's kind of one of those moments, and I thought, "Good for you," I don't think you're gonna win, but good for you, maybe you could do something else in the future, who knows? So, all right, so let's look at, we've looked at Kamala, we've looked at Biden, no, we haven't looked at Biden. Let's find Mr. Biden. Now, these are his transits right now, and I wanted to look at these because I think the news is finally starting to pick up and give him a little bit better press.
Yeah, I had said this a while back when people were really down on Biden, and especially this was that I picked up on this vibe. Some of the astrologers started making predictions about Trump winning in the fall of 23 because they saw the polls. And the thing is, Biden's late 23 is really hard because if you look at his rising degrees are really early Sagittarius, right?
Yes, yes.
And one person that I saw made a pretty compelling case to backtrack it even more to maybe instead of 3, like all the way back to 1. Doesn't matter because that area in 23 was really hard. And in fact, if you think about Saturn, when someone is saying to you, you're too old, that's Saturn. Saturn is the planet that rules
Yeah,
old age, right?
yeah,
But Saturn, as it goes now into 2024, once it gets past, the last planet that he has is itself because Saturn is 9 degrees. So Saturn will
mhm,
square itself, I believe it's in February. Before that, it's making a bit of a funny, the 150 to Pluto, which is a
yep,
health thing that could affect them
mhm,
that way, maybe.
mhm.
But it's a flyby. It keeps moving pretty quickly. So then it
Fingers crossed.
squares Saturn. But then after that, it moves forward, trines his Mars, and gets all the way up to 19 and comes back and lands on the trine to Mars. That Saturn becomes an asset, a no problem planet for him from the spring all the way through the election.
Yeah,
So this is why I think we're noticing that now they're saying, well, wait a second. You're saying Biden is too old, but the one that's behaving like he's senile is Trump. So why are we saying that? And Biden is even making ads saying, I think he's confused. He's basically flipped the script on him, which is, to me, Saturn switching. Now, if Saturn had been going into a square all year, then I would say then this whole thing with age is going to be a huge problem and you won't be able to
mhm,
shake it. But as it is, I
mhm.
think it'll get better,
Yeah.
from the Saturn.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think I have here is Joe Biden with the, transits for the election day, and we notice that, you know, I don't know, Mercury's right on his ascendant. That's not a super duper strong thing, but it isn't bad.
Well, it's not bad. It's the ruler that Mercury rules his career.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, that's really good. So I'm very happy about that with Uncle Joe. I think that's great. And the thing is that his years and years and years, all this cluster of his in the 12th house, people just don't understand how much he understands government, and
Mhm.
he's not a braggart. He doesn't put it out there. Anybody who's watched politics for a little while, I've watched, been aware of Joe Biden since I was a kid, and this guy is like, he has been through everything. There's hardly any situation in politics except for an insurrection that he hasn't come across. So, not surprised that he's doing really well in this. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's certainly doing it, and it was just
Yeah, and I mean the valid argument, although to expect a politician to be doing a U.S. election, trying to become president, and they all go through this. They'll have challenging aspects because it's like stepping into a gladiator's arena. It's really rough, and so he's got the Uranus moving up to oppose Mercury, oppose the Sun. Then it backtracks, but it's in opposition to those planets in late Scorpio. So that's
yeah.
one thing. But the thing is, when you look at his Uranus at birth, it's in Gemini. It sort of opposes these planets in a way already, but I think it's better. It makes it less harsh than if you had put it in Taurus, let's say in this case, right?
Mhm.
But regardless, that's a definitely a challenge. And then the Pluto cycle is squaring his moon off and on
Mhm.
throughout the year from Aquarius. So because the moon
The moon.
is in the health sign, that's a problem. It could do that for sure.
Mhm.
But the problem with astrology is that it could be health, but it could just be his work tension and the fact
Mhm.
that it's going to be ugly. Like what Barack Obama experienced in 2008 when Jeremiah Wright was brought into the foreground. He was getting pressure on his Pluto Moon square. Obama has a Pluto Moon square just like Joe, and
Mm.
so that can happen. But on the other side is the Saturn is very well placed for the election. And I noticed that Neptune in late Pisces, when Neptune is trining your planets, your position in a popularity contest gets a lot of assistance, which
Mhm.
is not the case for Trump. Trump has popularity now because Neptune is still trining his Venus, but the further it goes into the sign, it never comes back to trining that Venus. The further in, then it's in conjunct or 150 quincunx is Mars, quincunx the ascendant. That doesn't work nearly as well and tends to harm your popularity, right? So, to
Mm.
my mind, Biden has enough here, to
Yeah.
it's not a perfect chart, but they're never perfect anyway. I mean, they always have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember looking or listening to Vedic astrologers talking about Trump's chart the first time around in 2016. And I was so angry with them because they were all just gushing over how much he was going to help the country, and he was just this, like, I mean, they talked about him like he was the messiah. And it's true, his planets do connect to the United States chart and on many levels, and he was born on an eclipse, and I knew that. But as I'm
Right. But
working as yeah, I'm just yeah, go ahead.
well, okay. But the U.S. chart, yes, they do. But look at what happens, right? He has Jupiter at 17 degrees Libra. The U.S. Saturn conjoins that Jupiter. The U.S. Saturn is saying no to his expansionism.
Right.
Saturn is a society's limits, it's the boundaries, it's what we're all agreeing are going to be the rules and regulations. They're saying to him, no, you can't just expand in every direction. So that's a definite negative pattern. Then he has planets in Cancer, but he has Saturn in Cancer, Venus in Cancer, conjunct the American Mercury. There's a connection there, but I don't know that it's particularly great either once you involve Saturn. So to me, the Saturn on Jupiter alone broadcasts it pretty strongly. And then, of course, probably the biggest tell with the U.S. is that Trump's what is it? The U.S. Mars is conjunct Trump's moon and opposite his sun. So
Mm.
uh, uh, Trump is like the U.S. anger. He's tapping into U.S.
Yes.
combat and anger.
Yeah.
But does that mean you're going to be successful? No, it just means you're connecting to the anger part of
Yeah.
the chart. And when you see his own situation right now, his own transits, no, I mean, by the way, he's been rejected once. He can lie all he wants about what happened. He
Yeah.
was soundly rejected. And uh, they're going in. And this, by the way, brings in Nikki Haley as well. Nikki Haley, Trump, whoever you run, they have to defend indefensible positions. It's very difficult to do. Nikki Haley, she's a woman. She's more of a threat to Biden for sure. A lot of the suburban women will vote for her. The women that are abandoning Trump because they think he's a totally malevolent, person, say they would vote for her. But it isn't enough because she has to defend the Roe v. Wade thing. Otherwise, she'll lose her base. She has to say something, like this many weeks. I mean, women are fed up with that, and rightly so. They should be fed up, right? They should say, no, you can't take away this thing that's been there for 50 years. What century are we living in, right? So my feeling is, doesn't matter who you run, they've got a huge problem defending the positions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then you go back as far as when Obama was running. I remember looking at his chart and trying to see if I thought maybe he would win. And I thought, yeah, he could win, but why does this man want the job? The chart was just terrible for when he took office. It just looked
Yeah,
like,
well,
oh,
that happens though. I've seen this
yeah,
before quite a few times.
yeah.
Matter of fact, one of the more, this is astrology in action, where you learn from the way these planets go. So usually it's, you don't want to have Saturn on you when you're trying to win, because you'll probably lose, right? In
Mhm.
most cases, you'll lose. But for example, what you said is correct. In 2008, you could see, at the time, it was really harsh Pluto angles. In other words, Obama had health aspects in 2009 and 10 because he was trying to solve the Obamacare. He was trying to solve the
Yeah,
Affordable Care Act, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what can happen, is that you get that. Um, but uh, okay, I don't know what I was going with this thought. It's the idea that that politicians, if they have Saturn at the time, it's a dead stop. In 2020, Trump had Saturn directly opposite. There's no way he's going to make it. But Obama in 2012 got in. Saturn was safe because it was in the previous sign, or it was actually away. It was just starting to go into Scorpio. But then what happened was, when it got right to the square to his sun, he needed an astrologer there, because what he did is he released the website on that day.
Oh, right, right. And it was
Which
a disaster.
crashed. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, man, phone your astrologer. Any astrologer would have said, no, no, just delay, wait a week, because you do that, you're going to be embarrassed, right?
Mhm.
So the point being that things got tough. They also lost the Senate, later
Yeah,
on. He went into a pretty tough second term with the Saturn
yeah.
being in Scorpio. But you see this a lot that, for example, if you look at Kamala being part of a winning team, if because let's say that her ascending sign carries it over, because it's Gemini rising, Jupiter there,
Mhm.
big party, happy, we win. Yeah,
Yeah,
but then Saturn goes into Aries, and she's got the moon in Aries, and she's a Libra. This means a couple of really hardworking years, which is what happens when you're in politics. You're always exposed to running into a brick wall around lots of work, and nothing like Saturn to describe hard work.
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's absolutely right.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I brought those up because I had those were 2 things in astrology that I thought like, yeah, I'm reading this right, and it just I was with the Vedic astrologers predicting for Donald Trump, I missed that Saturn thing. That's really right that the Saturn would have blocked him, but the Obama, I just was like, "You're an intelligent person. Why would you take on all of this
Well,
burden?"
I mean, look, I think Obama by the end was probably completely sick of it. That's
Oh,
what
yeah,
he and Michelle were fed up with, being prisoners of the White House, because he was actually a real president, not like Trump, who spent all his time golfing.
right.
So the point is, though, that he went in, I think, for a good reason. He wanted to help the country, and
Yeah,
he was a normal individual. Trump is completely abnormal. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Biden is right. He's an aberration. He's an individual who, it's one of the most shameful things that has ever happened to this country, that someone, you know, this moronic, literally, got into power because
yeah.
he's unstable. He
So
says he's smart. He's not. Any person that tells you that they're a genius are almost certainly not.
yeah.
But
And
it's
it is just the whole globe is going around with this where we have these autocratic leaders or tyrants or dictators. I mean, it's just a symptom of the times that we're in, and hopefully, he won't come anywhere near the Oval again. But I look at Obama's progression, and I'm just thinking, thank goodness he did spend that time in the Senate. Thank goodness he
Mhm.
met Joe Biden. Thank goodness he chose Joe Biden as his VP, because it
Yes.
just kind of put a stamp of confirmation on Joe Biden for me, especially, just thinking, yeah, I mean, this is a very experienced guy. And, seeing him just campaigning, I was like, yeah, this is our supreme elder statesman. Of course, he
Totally.
should be president. Of
Totally.
course, he has these skills, and that's what we need. So I was really happy about that. Well,
You know, he definitely needed somebody like Biden to come in and straighten up the mess that Trump made.
and I'm so glad that he knew what had gone on before Trump by being the vice president. I think that
Mhm.
was so great. It was such a great setup so that, nobody could tell him what had happened, right? He knew, and that Scorpio, he had to love that
And
moment.
and
He had to love that.
part of the success of Obama and Biden's uh, uh, partnership was that when Obama asked Biden to be his vice president, said yes with one caveat, and that was he was to always be the last person in the room. That whatever
Oh,
the
Biden
meeting,
said
whatever
that?
the subject,
Oh,
Biden told Obama, I will be your VP, but the only thing I ask is that I'm the last person in the room. So after everything would be discussed, decided, figured out, whatever, and everyone would leave, it would just be the two of them left, and then Obama and he would talk it out.
Good.
no,
That's
And he
good.
that's
said,
I didn't know that, but I think that's a great
"Yeah,
request.
I
Good for him.
saw the photographer that was Obama's personal photographer when he was in the White House. I forget his name; it's escaping me right now.
Mhm.
But he did an interview where he said, yeah, he was there when it happened. So, he was in the room. And because someone else had heard the rumor and he confirmed it, he said, absolutely. He said, Biden was always the last person in the room. And even after I would leave from taking pictures, the two of them would be left and they would discuss everything that they had just gone through. And he said, and I know just from what was said around me, sometimes Obama would go with what Obama wanted to do. And sometimes he would go with what Biden advised him to do
Mm,
because he saw the value in 30 plus years in the Senate and
yep.
all the connections around the world that Biden had.
Mhm.
Biden knew people from around the world that
Mhm.
Obama was just kind of getting to know,
Exactly.
and who a lot of the Congress and the House at the time didn't really know, because a
Mm.
lot of the at that time, a lot of the leadership in the world had been there for a while, and
And
that's
I
where
believe
Biden.
I believe when Obama went in, I think there were quite a few changes of heads in the Senate and Congress too. There was quite
Mhm.
a big shakeup and change for a lot of reasons, but
Yeah.
that being the last in the room, I'm gonna have to try that on my next husband because that's a good agreement to have. That's a really good one. That's great. All right.
Well, I remember when I heard it, and then I heard the gentleman confirm it, and I thought, you know what? That had to been the best decision that Obama ever made,
Mhm.
was to say, yes, I agree to your caveat. Let's do it. And I
Yeah,
mean, that's why they were as successful as they were, especially with foreign policy.
absolutely. Yeah,
Biden knew foreign policy frontwards, backwards, inside out, upside down.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Andre, thank you so much. We've been about an hour
Mhm.
and we've covered all of my little topics. Is there anything else you want to say or anything else you want to talk about? Because
I think that's good. I think we've covered a lot of ground,
yeah,
and yeah, we can leave it for another time. We
He's
can.
gonna get hit with me
I know you wanted to talk
Friday.
about
So
maybe next time we can talk about the. You had questions about the whole sign system, and
yes.
happy
Yes.
to
And
to.
I've been watching Dan Waits. I've been just soaking up all of his information about he did that series about the 2020s and what to expect with it.
Mhm.
It was a lot about Pluto and Aquarius and then the Pluto and Aquarius cycle and all that. I was just like, oh, yes, give me more. It's great. I'm such a geek. I mean, all day I have had YouTube just like plug, just blaring out. And so, I mean, 8 hours of YouTube, that's probably enough for anybody in one day. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. We will talk about whole sign houses next time. That'd be great.
All right.
I'm making a note. Okay, everybody, thank you for being in the chat. I hope nobody is too disappointed that we didn't answer questions or anything. I hope you enjoyed our discussion about these couple of charts and events. And Sherry, thank you so much for hopping on at the last minute. That was
you're
really,
more than
really
welcome.
helpful. Really
I had to pop
appreciate
up a
that.
couple of times to go deal with laundry in the washing machine, but
Well, that's what I'm going to go do now. Yeah. And Andre, thank you
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. That was
Yeah,
fun.
it was really great. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks for
Bye,
joining
everyone.
us. Bye.
Bye.